All right, everybody, on today's podcast, I get a little passionate because we get to say goodbye to blueprints and finding flow within frameworks. Goodbye to all the copy and paste. This is the one way, this is the only way, and the thing that prevents you from succeeding. And we get into the frameworks and how we use them. And I apologize for my burp. That came out of nowhere. And I'm keeping it in the intro because I'm human. And how to use those frameworks to be able to succeed. Plus, I share 5 guiding principles that I've used to help build and scale all the companies for my clients, my biggest case studies, and myself included, and how to tie them all together. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind is Yours Show. And if you are watching this, you have noticed there is something different, and that is the pink mohawk is gone, Poppy the troll is out, and I feel back as my bald, bold, beautiful self. But today's show is not about my mohawk being gone. It's about how to say goodbye to the blueprints and how to find flow within using frameworks. And I'm really, really excited about this episode because this is something that I've planted my flag in, and quite frankly, a painful lesson that it took me about 10 years of entrepreneurship to learn. And there's so much competing information online about what matters when you are either growing or scaling your business, right? One of the narratives that we see all the time is that everyone has their own way of doing business, and the common blueprint that is seen online. If you follow these 3 steps, if you hit this one thing, if you do this in this area, and it only teaches you what to do and not actually how to think. And this is something that I fell into, and I don't talk about this, and I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but one of the reasons that I struggled in the beginning with Civilized Caveman was because I built and scaled that business as a food blogger by following my intuition and allowing my creativity to come out. And then once I started hitting consistent $100,000, $150,000 months, I started going to people and I'm like, what do I do? And they're like, follow this blueprint, or this is the only way to do affiliate marketing, or this is the only way to post a recipe, or this is exactly how you should be posting on Facebook. And what ended up happening is I would pigeonhole myself into those blueprints, and then I would feel like I was failing and I had no flexibility whatsoever in protecting the outcome or protecting my customer in that outcome. And it's because when I was given blueprints, I was told this was the only way. It told me exactly what to do. Follow this plan, do this exactly like it is, and this will be the result. But what it prevented me from doing was actually learning how to think and to take a framework that gave me the bumpers and even a way to do it, but allow the most important ingredient of my business success to shine through, which is me. Because what blueprints do is blueprints take away agency, they take away autonomy, and they take away our individual creative expression on how we do what we do. And so when we surrender that innovation, when we surrender that creativity, we lose the essence of what gives people evidence to trust us, like us, build a relationship with us. And quite frankly, it takes the identity of who we are and it relegates it down to a blueprint. But it also assumes that the market, the sales, the offers, or any ecosystem online remain the same at all times. And I think about this all the time because I am so close to some of my quote unquote competitors. I have dear friends and clients that do the exact same thing that I do, but because of who we are, we attract completely different audiences. And because we don't follow blueprints and we're trying to put everybody in the same system, we allow our unique identity to come through, which allows the unique people that resonate with us to be our clients, to be our customers, and to be able to get the results. And so the things that matter in business more than anything are frameworks, which we're talking about today, because I think blueprints should go in the trash and frameworks should stick around, and principles. And it even reminds me of a lesson that I talk about all the time. And I don't know if you've ever built a home from scratch, right? If you've ever bought a piece of land, hired an architect to make your blueprints, and then had your home built. But I joke about this all the time because I say this to people as somebody who's built a home, that when was the last time you had blueprints and the first version of the blueprint was the exact way that the house looked? And very rarely, and I've yet to find somebody say yes to this, so like, yes. No, the blueprint is what gets the home started. But then as it's building built and being created, it makes adjustments and a room changes and this goes in a different area. And what ends up happening is you get a completely different result or slightly different result than what was on the blueprint. But in the lens of business, when people follow those blueprints, it creates permanent places of pain. And then you start to get upset. This isn't working because the blueprint said it should work, or I'm doing exactly what it should said and I'm throwing more money at it and it's still not working. But it's because not everything is cut and paste and applied to everybody the same exact way, because we need our individual expression. We need our creativity. We need to match our business to how we communicate. If I'm incredible on video and you do not like doing videos, but you're an incredible writer, and I'm like, hey, the only way to build a customer journey is to use video, it's going to prevent you from sharing your gift and sharing your passion or communicating effectively with your audience, because it's my blueprint. But if I'm like, hey, with every customer journey, we need to communicate effectively and we need to hit these 5 steps that I talk about all the time. For me, hitting those 5 steps are going to be in video, but for you, it might be in writing. And for somebody else, it might be in visual imagery. But that creative expression is what fits inside of a framework. And so when we really, really think about business, it's frameworks which protect an outcome, and then principles, which are our guiding lines or our bumper lanes, per se, of how we operate within them. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to use tried and true approaches at each stage of your business and then have them scale as you do. And I got to give Gary Vee credit, because I've been consuming Gary for years and he's an incredible entrepreneur. But one of the things that he said, and I heard him say this in person somewhere, I don't know, 7 years ago, and it's stuck with me since. And he said, if you're romantic about how you do business, you'll go out of business. And the challenge with blueprints is that when they stop working, instead of making adjustments or creating our own identity, people ride the Titanic to the bottom until they have to find another blueprint and find another blueprint and find another blueprint, constantly feeling like you're in this cycle. But principles, what we're talking about here, paired with frameworks, principles act as the commandments of your business, like the bumper lanes to operate from. And they are also more successful than a blueprint, because as they grow, you grow. And as you grow, they grow. So when we understand that our business is our unique identity, whether you're a coach, a consultant, you have a physical product, you have a service, you have a software, there are best practices to follow. Best practices are frameworks that other people have used, that have been tried and tested. And within those frameworks, they allow space for our unique identities. And in those identities, what we get to put in is who we are and how we do business and what brings us the most joy and allows us to show up at our best. And so when you have frameworks, like for example, if you've been listening to this podcast for any semblance of time, I always say there's 3 core customer journey mistakes you should never make. That's a framework. I say my 8 sandwich are the 5 steps that are like the required 5 steps to communicate to customers in all the pipelines of your business, meaning your marketing, your sales, your delivery, and your team. That framework is like the best practices, but how you execute those best practices is up to you and your identity and how you communicate and how you're serving your clients and what the needs of your clients are to be able to deliver that. And when you have those frameworks and then you add blueprints, or not blueprints, cancel blueprints, I'm not canceling that out. Then when you add principles, same P word, the alliteration in marketing for me made me do it. But when you have those frameworks and then you add principles, those principles allow you to operate within those frameworks to create the results that you want. And so when I think about all the companies that I scaled, and that myself included, I'm going to go back to Civilized Caveman as an example. When I started as a food blogger, I had never taken a business course, run a business, read a business book, learned from anybody. I was just passionate about documenting my healing journey, going from bulimic for most of my life and having struggles with food and body image issues. And so I made a rule that I was going to post a blog every day and post it on social media. But if somebody took the time to comment, I was going to respond because they took the time. And so one of the ways that I built and scaled that company is that I responded to every comment personally for the 6 years or 7 years that I ran that company. And that was really a principle that I had, is that every relationship mattered. And if you took the time, I would take the time. And that's what led that website to end up getting 5 million uniques a month, having a 22-week New York Times bestselling book. I had a #1 app in the world. but I didn't have the quote unquote audience metrics to have that success. When I launched my book, we only had like 7,000 people on our email list and like 15,000 social media followers. And my publisher, I'll never forget this, said, "You will never be a New York Times bestseller because you don't have the audience." Well, turns out he was wrong, and turns out we did it for 22 weeks in a row. But it was because of my relationship with all of the people and the depth of that relationship. And so even when I think about physical products companies that I've scaled, right? We have some companies, like supplement company that comes to mind right now. And you always hear this in the lens of like the customer's always right in customer service world. But what we really genuinely cared about in one of these companies that we scaled was that people had a relationship with the brand and felt like family, and that anything that happened with the product, we could handle, and we could bring that relationship back into integrity. We had another company where one of our principles were everybody's voice matters. And so we would run focus calls and get on calls with customers and let them give us feedback. And then after a time, we had this group of hundreds of customers that every time we had a product idea, we would share it with them, and then we would integrate their feedback, and they would be the first ones to buy the product, but also share their friends that product and tell them about it, and expanded our reach and different areas of that business. We have another company that I help scale, and I just love supplement companies. They're one of my favorite things to help. And we had a principle that everybody got the benefit of this product. Even if they didn't buy the product, we could still help them. And that allowed us to recover cart abandons and save retention and relationships, but also 4x the company. And so when we really think about what was underneath the success were frameworks and principles. The principles being the way in which we operate in the day-to-day, and the frameworks being the container in which we operate. And so to take my 5 steps as an example, which are acknowledge, prepare, project, pre-handle, and excite, I believe that everybody should communicate with their customers using that framework. Whether you're on Instagram DMs, on Zoom calls, on coaching calls, in meetings, you're on a marketing, you're doing your marketing, you're converting sales, you're in delivery, that's the framework. But then I have a principle in my life and business that says if it can be personal, it must be. And what I mean by that is if I have the opportunity to communicate with you and I can send you a text message, an email, or a video, guess which one I'm choosing? I'm choosing the video. So when I go apply those 5 steps to an Instagram message, I'm applying it on a video. I open my phone and I record those 5 steps. But for you, you might work in those 5 steps and feel like you're better at communicating with writing out words. And so you will hit that same one by typing it out because you have a principle that determines that's how you communicate with your audience, right? And so for me, one of the principles that was born out of Civilized Caveman is that relationships beat algorithms, because this became the framework of my 5 steps. Because after I walked away from that company and I looked at all my success, what I started to realize was because I didn't follow people's blueprints and I did what felt right to my heart and I communicated in a way that felt right to me. And what I believed is that if I was giving you food, you were creating food to feed people you loved, and we were a deep community. So I said relationships beat algorithms, because in that company, and just like in my company today, this one, you listening to this podcast, you shoot me a DM, you want to get on a call, I will say yes all the time. It might take me a week or 2 depending on my schedule, but no matter what, if you DM me on Instagram a question, I'm going to respond. If you say, hey man, I'd love your perspective on scaling my business from 10K to 20K, I'm going to support you and answer your question. I always genuinely prioritize the relationship because it makes me feel good in my heart, and I love doing it every single day. And that principle that I had, I didn't realize I was doing it at the time. It was accidental because I was operating my business in alignment with my values. But relationships beat algorithms became basically our entire movement. And from that, the 5 steps were born. And these are the same 5 steps that I share with you. They apply to partner relationships and sales and marketing and email and everywhere in between. And so it gives us a framework on how to communicate. And then the principles allow us to operate within that. to be able to support our relationships, to be able to communicate effectively, and for me to prioritize relationships over everything. Relationships over revenue, relationships over algorithms, relationships over competition, relationships over everything, because I believe in them. And I love people, and I think more love is required in the world. And I want us to all be able to love our customers, love ourselves, love our team, and be able to scale our businesses in the forefront. And so what I wanted to do today is I wanted to share with you 5 principles of success that I use. And really, these are ones that I've pulled from all of my clients. And when I look at what we did to double their consulting company, or to help with their coaching business go from 30 grand a month to 120 grand a month, or helped one of mine go from 110 grand a month to $400,000 a month in 6 months. Those are like on the service, coach, consultant side. But then these are the same principles that we use to literally take one company that was doing 1.2 million a year with supplements, and we added $900,000 in realized revenue with existing customers with these principles. And so I'm going to share these with you because I think that they're really, really powerful and important, and they will give a purview or an understanding of what these principles really, really mean. And so if you see me looking down at my screen, it's because I have the notes in front of me, because I'm really good at remembering everything. But if I don't write these principles down, you're going to end up with 77 principles that don't make sense. And so principle number one is depth before width. Depth before width. And so one of the things that you'll hear me say all the time is that scaling a business comes from retention and not acquisition. And if you go ask any company and ask them what is more advantageous from a cost perspective, is it cheaper to retain a customer, or is it cheaper to acquire a customer? And the answer is it's always cheaper to retain a customer, because you have the relationship. There's an understanding of who they are, what they do, what you're helping them with. And so in understanding depth versus width, we understand that the businesses that scale, that have the biggest impact, come from the fact that they prioritize the relationship. They help people get results. Those people get results, and we retain that relationship. And we retain that relationship. They refer other people into the business, and they stick around in our ecosystem. And so for me, being 2024, and you might be listening to this 10 years in the future, hi from the past. But in that same vein, at a beginner level in your business, so let's say you're doing under $10,000 a month, the most important thing that you can do is focus on building community, building connection, building relationships, because that community is what's also helping you navigate where your business is going, and integrating feedback and giving a place to connect with your customers and deepen their relationship and deepen the amount of endowment they have with you that makes you a part of their world and them a part of yours, so that you have a community of incredible people, whether you call it your 100 true fans or your 1,000 true fans. But community comes before selling every single time. But then if you think about it as a scaling company, it is really, really easy to get spread so thin. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is they think community is being everywhere all the time. I'm in a Facebook group, I have a TikTok, I have an Instagram, I have a Reddit thread, I have a WhatsApp channel, I have an extra Facebook group, and I have one for this one. But what it really, really does is it dilutes depth. And so when you're focused on scaling your business, what you want to do is have your community in one place, like Instagram or your email list or a Facebook group, where you can go really, really deep with them, because you can leverage that community and the attention of that community to help support other platforms. And so I remember at one of the supplement companies that I referenced today, where we scaled them from $1 million a month to, $1 million a day in about a year and a half. One of the things that we did is we focused so deeply on building two-way relationships via email. And as those relationships scaled, meaning more people replied, we had to hire more people, but the revenue was in the company. But then when we decided to launch a new social platform, we would launch that platform, and then we would use our community on email to help people go engage with that platform, to share it with their friends, to find people to come follow that platform. And we were able to add lots and lots of followers, to the tune of getting tagged 6,500 times a day on Instagram for like a 30-day period. And that was because we went super, super deep with that community, and we prioritized it. And then we used that as a strategy to also honor the connection and play the game of receptivity, which is from the book, The Go-Giver. And when we played that game, they felt a part of our community and shared. We were helping them, and they were helping us spread the message because they had a relationship with the company because we prioritized depth over width. Principle number 2 is do it before you delegate it. Do it before you delegate it. And so I have this genuine belief as a beginner in business, as you're starting out, you can't just delegate to avoid learning. This is probably the biggest trap that I see people falling into. We have people that outsource their clarity and then get taken through the ringer because they're not getting the results or the expectations met, or even having an understanding of where they're going because they haven't done it for themselves. And this is a trap that I have fallen into wholeheartedly. In the early days of my social media, when I grew the Civilized Caveman social media to like 1 million combined followers, it was because I was doing it. I knew how to edit the videos, and I knew how to post the photo, and I knew how to write the captions. And then I got to a point where I was like, oh, I should hire somebody to do this. And immediately, and I mean immediately, our engagement tanked. And it wasn't because I didn't know how to do it, but I was committing the second mistake, which is delegating the clarity and not owning the vision of it. But as we start out in business, and even like if a new social media platform launches tomorrow, it's so easy to be like, I want to hire somebody to run that. I want to hire somebody to run that. But in our businesses and as entrepreneurs, we have to have a general understanding of what goes into the process and what goes into the functions to make it successful so that we can communicate effectively about it, but so that we can also provide clarity and guidance on where we want to go. And the reason this matters is because as you scale your company and you do hire somebody into that role, this allows you to have a base understanding to be able to manage and support somebody else doing a task or an outcome on your team. And my dear friend Alex Sharfin is incredible about teaching scaling. But in the early stages, let's say you're on your way to your first $500,000 or your first $1 million, there's a lot of hats being worn by us, right? We're each really like a multitude of tools. We're like a Swiss Army knife where there's like 9 tools that we have. But eventually one of those tools consumes too much of our time, and we need to hire somebody to execute that role. And when we hire somebody to execute that role, you're either going to go one of 2 ways. You're going to hire somebody who's never done it before because you're just starting out, and you're going to end up training them, but you have to take them through the same process and allow them to do it to be able to communicate. Or you're going to pay a whole lot more money to hire somebody that's better than doing it than you ever were. You're going to learn in the process, but then you're going to be able to communicate back and forth to be able to manage that. And so I have a principle that's been underneath all of them, and was on a coaching call this morning with my incredible clients, of we fell into the same bucket because we delegated something before we had done it and before we had a full understanding of what went into it to be able to effectively manage it. And the reason this is so important is a lot of the entrepreneurs that I've helped build and scale their business, but especially the ones with like coaching, consulting, masterminds, courses, is they end up with really bloated teams because they delegate things that they haven't done. And so they end up delegating complexities and processes that don't need to be there. And it creates competing interest, and it costs massive amount of cash flow and efficiency in the business. And so principle number 2 is do it before you delegate it. Principle number 3, and I referenced this one before, never outsource your clarity without your own experience. And I think this one applies to both beginners and scaling it the same way. As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, the vision is ours. And I know this is probably the number one critical mistake that I've made more than anything, is I have done this to Ashley on our team, who's our incredible CEO. I've done this to basically every employee that's been in, where I was either tired or burnt out or not really understanding and not staying in the bucket of dreaming what my vision was. And I basically was like, do it your way, or whatever you think is best. But it was missing my vision, a vision that only I can see, a principle that only I can stand on, and a way that I can articulate it. And this is a big, big, big one for me, because I believe that the best visions come to life because no one's ever done them before. And you even listening to this right now, no one's built what you've built because no one's you. No one sees what you see because it's you. And when I think back at my life in Civilized Caveman, and even how I sold my book, when I came up with a marketing plan to promote the Paleo Kitchen, my publisher said I couldn't do it. He's like, I've never seen that before. It's not going to work, and that's going to break the contract. because I was only allowed to give out a certain amount of recipes from the book. And I was like, I don't believe that's true. I was like, I have a belief that the more recipes I give people from the book, the more they're going to want to buy the book and have this book on their kitchen counter. And they're like, you can't do that. I'm like, nobody makes recipes off Facebook. Like, people want to have this book. And we got into fights, we got into legalities about it. And eventually I did it anyways. And it was one of the reasons that the book was so successful. But that was clarity that only I had and that only I could see. And that came from my experience. And I think it's really, really important to have self-trust to be able to navigate this, but understand that the clarity that we're looking for isn't going to come from other people. It can be influenced by their opinions, by their views, by their experience, but ultimately at the end of the day, it also has to align with us and allow us to get crystal clear on the outcome we're going after, to be able to protect that vision and focus on that outcome and create principles to operate by every day, this being one of them, to be able to accomplish that goal. So that's principle number 3. Principle number 4, sales is about service. Sales is about service, and it doesn't matter what you're selling. It doesn't matter if you're selling a software, if you're selling a coaching program, if you're selling a physical product. When we sell services, software, coaching programs, events, or anything that we're doing, we are doing that to be a service of somebody who's looking to achieve that thing or eliminate that pain in their life. And this is probably one of the biggest guiding principles. And I will share that every single one of my clients, myself included, live and die by this principle. And it's because of that we're so aligned. And it's probably the filter for people not wanting to work with me. Like, if you're like, hey, I don't care about people, I just want to take their credit cards, I want to put them in a crypto scam or a Forex scam, I'm not your guy, because that selling isn't about service. But I have a belief, and the one thing that all of my clients and all of my case studies and all of the success stories have in common is they actually care about people, and they care about the results that people get. And so for me, what's important is thinking about this, especially if you're starting to build your company or you're in the early stages of your business, is that having no pressure sales on calls is so, so, so important. And you're going to hear it everywhere else. Well, you got to make them pay on the call. You got to make them do this. Not if it sacrifices your values, and not if it goes against this principle. Like, I have a private client right now in mind that does multiple 7 figures a year, that does 0 high pressure sales, 0. And it's one of the core things that I teach, is being of service and giving people agency to be able to make their decision and also feel good about it. Because I've thought about all the times where I've needed help or I've needed support, and I've been in a decision bucket, and someone's like, well, you should pay now. Like, why do you need to talk to your partner? Like, what do you need to think about? Like, if you really wanted it, you do it now. But it always left me feeling icky. And that's because this principle wasn't being followed. Sales is genuinely about service. And I believe that I want to treat people. And the thing that all my clients have in common is they want to treat people and have those people feel like they would want to feel. So at the beginning level of it, it's about building connection and community. As you remembered earlier from principle number 1, it's depth, not width. But you're not going to create depth in a community by being high pressure, being transactional in nature, and you end up losing both games at the same time. You get high pressure and transactional, and you lose the relationship, which doesn't allow depth, but you also lose the revenue because it's not going to close in the first place, especially if it's against your values. And I'll give a tangible physical product example of this as well. One of the strategies that I use for physical products companies, especially when it comes to people shopping their product or getting into cart abandons, is when somebody adds the product to their cart and they leave, I don't ever send them an email that says, hey, you forgot something, because I've never forgotten to buy something that I really wanted. Instead, I send an email connecting with them and asking what was missing and what we could have done better to support them. And I take that feedback, and then we offer guidance of like, well, you might want to start here, or start with this video we have, or you might want to look into this, but genuinely being of service and improving upon the silence. And the reason this principle matters so much to understand at the early stages is because also a mistake that I see people making when they're scaling is they're so quick to scale the process or the sales process that they automate too quick, and it sacrifices them the relationship. You end up having somebody go through 7 steps just to get on a call, and then they get on a call with you thinking they're getting sold into your program, and then they get passed off to somebody else. They don't hear from you again or speak to you again. But sales is about service. And at the core of selling is trust. And trust comes from a relationship and people feeling safe. And I always like to give the litmus test on myself of how would it feel if I was on the receiving end? How would it feel if I went into this funnel? Or how would it feel if it was this hard to get a hold of somebody? Or one of the ones that drives me nuts. You can't book a call with me till you pay me. Nope, I don't do that. I don't do that. What if you don't like me? What if I don't like you? What if I can actually help solve your problem in 5 minutes and it just required a connection point? But we can't eliminate the humanity in what we're doing because we're quote unquote trying to scale, or else we end up preventing us from scaling because we're preventing a relationship with the person that, depending on how they feel, dictates whether they work with us or not. And so principle number 4 is sales is about service. I believe in relationships over algorithms, right? A core principle that we just came up with an intensive we did is relationships over revenue as a core value of the company and a guiding principle, that the connections and the relationships of the people that are in our community are way more important than any amount of money that they'll ever pay us, which means if they have a question, we answer their question. If they ask how they can work with us, then we tell them how they can work with us, but it's really being about service. So that's principle number 4, which then brings us to principle number 5. And I think this one ties together a lot of them too. Principle number 5 is complexity kills and simplicity scales. And so early on, especially early on in business, working towards your first 5K months, 10K months, or sometimes even your first 25, 30K months, there's this trap that we fall into that when something starts working, we make mistake number 4 and we automate too quickly by not following principle number 4. But then we fall into this trap of more. Oh, I'm going to add another step to remove myself from the funnel. I just need more leads to go into this, or I just need more attention, without ever focusing on what are the simple mile markers or inflection points or insertion points that have the biggest impact on this customer's journey, on them becoming a client or them referring another client. And we end up automating ourselves out of it and having these really complex systems or complex paths for people to follow that actually get in the way of accomplishing the result. And like one of the things that I see all the time is like, I go to shop on websites and I'll look and I'm like, oh, this is the product I want. And by the time it's in my cart, I had to click 13 times just to get it into my cart. And it's frustrating because I'm like, no, I know this pair of shoes that I want. No, I don't want your sneaker protection plan. I don't want the spray accelerant that goes on it. I don't need 7 pairs of backup laces. No, I don't want to buy a second pair for half price. No, I don't want an auto ship pair every 3 months. No, I don't want to donate to this. No, I don't want this. Oh, thank you. Now I can finally buy. Complexity kills because it just creates confusion and it creates friction for the people that we're trying to help and serve to be able to get into our ecosystem to help and serve them. If your marketing is complex, it's going to get in the way of somebody resonating with it and reaching out to get into a sales process. If your sales process is complex and somebody's like, I'm ready to go now, and they have to follow all these steps that get in the way of them having a connection point with you, you'll never close that deal. If your delivery process is complex, then the moment they buy, instead of being able to use the product, use the service, and get into action and get a result, it's overwhelming for them, which is what we call the drown the journey in the 3 mistakes. And then they never get to use the product or service, leading them to ask for a refund, or even worse, just having resentment because they never used it and they didn't have the courage to reach out and ask for a refund to rectify the relationship. And so complexity kills and simplicity scales. And when it comes to scaling, and this is a big lesson for me because I've been pretty averse to data my whole life. It's not the natural part of my brain, my bald head that you can see now. But if you can't measure it, you can't scale it. And so even when we're taking sales, for an example, focus on the minimum viable sales path and add more people to that path. And so what do I mean by that? I'll have clients coming to me and they're like, all right, my webinar's working pretty well. And I want to keep that, but then I want to add a mini course series before that. And then I want to add a triage call before that. And then it creates confusion for people coming in. But what if the webinar worked and we focused on the webinar And we focused on retaining the relationships of people who didn't buy to convert them into sales. And then we had that as a measurable metric to be like, yep, this works every time these people see it. And then instead of adding complexity before it, we focused on finding more people and building relationships with them to get into it. When we really, really get down to it, and one of the most incredible authors that I recommend everybody reads is Mike Michalowicz, and he has a plethora of books. Clockwork being the one where you focus on your outcomes and your core needle movers, right? Another one of his that I love dearly is Fix This Next, where he helps you look at the core functions of your business and prioritize what you need to do to scale to the next level. But really in all of it, what we're getting down to is the foundational root of the simplest path for somebody to follow to go from, I don't know who you are, to I really resonate with your messaging. I have enough of your messaging to realize I want to work with you. I'm in your sales process. Oh, I bought from you. Now I'm in your delivery process. Because complexity applies in every avenue of your business. It can apply in your marketing channels. It can apply in your sales channels. And it especially applies in your delivery channels, to where you'll buy a product and you got 7 emails before you even know what to do because it's so complex it's getting in the way of the outcome. And so the easiest way to think about this is to keep it simple. And keeping it simple means focusing on the outcomes of your business, focusing on the outcomes of what you're trying to help people to achieve, and making sure that we create the least resistant path for people to get there. And so to wrap this one up, because I am like on a go tangent and I could really do this for like an hour and a half. The biggest and most important thing to understand is that blueprints will prevent you from having your secret sauce and your success in your business. Frameworks will empower you to give you a tried and true recipe to follow, and then have the agency and creativity to make that recipe yours because it's hitting those core outcomes that we know always move the needle. When you understand the benefit of your success comes down to operating in frameworks and not blueprints, you've won the first half of the game. The second half of the game is taking those frameworks and putting them into practice with your identity. And I'm going to do an entire another podcast on hard skills versus soft skills and what it takes to build and scale a business. That's not today because that's a whole other long episode. It'll be action-packed, I promise. But there's this point where you take that framework and then in using that framework, you make it your own. You realize that you don't like sending videos like I do, but you love sending gifts to people when you're communicating with them in your sales process. Or you don't like sending follow-up emails, just like I don't. So instead you send follow-up texts because you prefer to communicate that way. But when you use a framework like the 5 steps, which is like the core component of all customer journey that we teach people in their marketing, their sales, and their delivery, you're hitting those 5 steps, but you're doing it your unique way. And so the way to win is to operate in frameworks, because frameworks teach you how to think, which means in a year from now or 2 years from now or 4 years from now, when you hit another roadblock in business or something doesn't work anymore, you don't have to go endlessly searching for another blueprint for somebody else to convince you that their way is the only way. You get to lean back on your framework and make adjustments to help you protect that outcome. And so when you focus on frameworks and then you create guiding principles for how you're going to operate within your business day to day, and you commit to following those principles, then the rest of it is you being in the kitchen and making a recipe that both you love and enjoy making, and one that your customers and potential customers are ordering. And then you continually make iterative adjustments at every stage of the business. And as you go through that, your guiding principles might adjust as you go from a team of 1 to a team of 3. They might adjust as you realize that there's something happening in your business that you love and you want to protect and you want to keep it. So you want everybody in your team to operate the same. But that's where the fun happens, and that's where the autonomy happens, because every single person that we celebrate is an innovator, right? We look at the people who created the social media platforms and the one who's going viral because they're doing mukbang videos. And there was one person who decided to live stream themselves eating copious amounts of food, and everybody watched and they created a trend. But your uniqueness, your individualism, your vision, your clarity can be applied into your business to make you stand out in a crowded market when you use frameworks to allow yourself to exist. And then you create principles that you follow every day and your team follows every day, bringing you closer to that result and making the impact that you want to make. And so I'm really, really stoked that I got to do this show. I realized that it just went for 39 minutes and my solo shows are normally never this long. And so I apologize in advance, but I was really, really excited to unpack this one. And I'm really, really excited because we also have an event coming up. And if you're listening to this, there's still time. We have a couple of spots left. But if you want to come to Montana and hang out with me and like 15 other entrepreneurs, co-hosted by me, Kate Perkovic, and my dear friend TJ, we're going to be working on the person on day 1, the back end of the business on day 2, and the front end of the business on day 3, plus having other entrepreneurs give you clarity and mastermind and integrate so that you can add rocket fuel to every ounce of your business. Just shoot me a DM or a message on Instagram that says event, or just go to mindofgeorge.com/event. The tickets are $9.97 for 3 full days of us teaching and building and co-working and learning. And all we're teaching you is frameworks and how to apply them into your business. We're going to be focusing on you, which is how you become the next version of yourself, to be the best version of yourself, right? To operate the business, our mindset, our habits, our behaviors, the things that make us successful. Then on day 2, we're going to be focused on the back end, which is your customer journey, your offers, where you support people, how you support people, your delivery. And then on day 3 is going to be how you attract more people into that with your marketing, with your messaging, and some of the incredible frameworks we have that will make you a superpower to be able to create, 60 days of content in a 1-hour meeting and show up consistently, having people constantly DMing you and reaching out and all those magical things. And so if you haven't got your ticket yet, I can't wait to see you. We cap it, we limit it at 20 people because we like it intimate. We like being close. And really the power of the events is that it resets all of us, gives us a fresh perspective and an entire team of people to support us in our process as we build deep community. And so I love you to pieces. I appreciate you immensely. I'm going to wrap this show now with my nice shiny bald head. So I'll either see you in the next episode or you will hear me in your earballs. But either way, we're done for today.